Escaping from Eden, Chapter 7, The Memory of Us. It is an amazing privilege to sit at the feet of the elders and storytellers of our ancestors. We might respectfully hesitate before wading in as if we totally understand the territory being described to us. On the other hand, we only impoverish ourselves by ignoring or remaining agnostic about what we have been shown. Until recently, the mainstream tendency has been to regard mythology as a melange of fiction and moral tale. In faith communities, there is often a pull in the opposite direction, towards a fundamentalist interpretation which reads the text as literally as possible. Every preacher knows the subtle dance shaped by the presence of these polar opposites in every congregation. As I continued my journey through Genesis, Popol Vuh, the cuneiform tablets, and other accounts besides, noting all the parallels and correlations, my sense was growing that even the most metaphorical of myths may turn out to be the vehicles of ancient memory. In a plural Elohim reading of Genesis, in the cuneiforms of Mesopotamia and the Popol Vuh of Mesoamerica, among the themes that repeat is the assertion that modern human beings emerged through interaction with another intelligence, and that our evolution was something that happened artificially and in stages. Popol Vuh's account matches the Sumerian story, beginning with the development of male avatars or slaves for the superior beings. Only in a later stage is humanity modified to become a fully fledged, fertile, male and female species all its own. In Popol Vuh, just as in the Mesopotamian tablets and in Genesis, we humans ultimately become a species whose progress creates angst among the superior beings. In Popol Vuh, the engineers convene an urgent conference to discuss the problem. As we listen in, we hear them closely paraphrase the anomalous verse from the book of Genesis, quote, "Now they have become like one of us," end quote. If that correlation weren't enough of a waving flag, the ancient elders of the Efik people of Nigeria would tell us that in the beginning, their gods had the exact same conversation. The Efik tell the story of the first human couple formed by two powerful creative sky beings, Abasi and Atai. Here's their account. In the beginning, human beings were like children. Their understanding and intellect were simple and innocent. Unable even to feed themselves, they need the sky being Abasi and his wife Atai to supply their every need. And at first, the human beings are content to be looked after this way. However, after a season, there comes a day when the humans tire of living in the home of the sky beings. They feel that they are ready to live on the earth. Abasi, however, has qualms about this next step. He sees the earth as a place where the humans' knowledge and understanding will grow and mature. He fears that the human beings will become too developed and come to match his own level of wisdom. Anxiously, he confers with his wife. He tells her that he does not want the humans to become, quote, like one of us, end quote. Atai ponders the matter and determines a compromise. The humans are to live on the earth by day, but must return each day to their home with the sky beings to eat and rest. At this stage, the first humans are forbidden to marry or have children, or hunt or farm. This limit has been set in order to prevent the humans from producing a nation strong enough to challenge the power of the sky beings. But after a season, the woman tires of being treated like a child. So one day, she simply refuses to return with the man to the home of Abasi and Atai. The next time the man sees the woman, he finds her working in the fields. She has learned to farm and is growing her own food. The man is impressed with her wisdom and independence and quickly decides to join her and help her. The two soon fall in love and never return to the sky base again. After many years, the humans become a great people, living on the earth and working in the fields. One day, Abasi goes down to the earth and into the fields, where he is horrified by what he finds. The humans have grown significantly, both in intelligence and in number. Abasi's fears have been proven. When he returns home to the sky, Abasi shares his concerns with Atai. Atai now produces an emergency plan. In order to combat human development, she sends death and suffering into the world and causes the humans to be in perpetual conflict. The first man and woman die immediately, and their descendants, they have experienced conflict and suffering on earth ever since. The number of correlations between the Afik account and the three mythologies we have already compared really is astonishing. The ancient Afik elders are singing us a song with many familiar notes. Their story tells of a staged development of human beings, engineered by powerful sky beings. These beings begin the experiment with non-self-aware, non-sexualized beings who have to be corralled and cared for. Another correlation is the fact that the food, self-awareness, and intellectual progress are offered to the man by the woman, defying the wishes of their creators. The initiative results in childbearing and punishment, parallel after parallel. The strange motif of the threat of human numbers echoes from the Sumerian account, and Attai's cruel response in the Afik story echoes the limiting of human lives, the mass killing of the Great Flood, and the fragmentation of Babel. All four creation accounts repeat the theme of creators pitching themselves against human progress. It is a strange motif, and it is hard to imagine in whose interest such a story would have been created. It would appear to glorify no one in the story. In the Mayan story of Popol Vuh, the engineers share the same anxiety about human progress and intervene decisively to limit the humans' capacity to cause their masters too much trouble. The engineers achieve this with the downgrade of the humans' vision and understanding. The engineers' third experiment in engineering people resulted in human beings who were capable of seeing beyond the limits of earthly, physical reality. To make humans more manageable, the engineers take this higher faculty and switch it off. It is the final tweaking of the human condition as described in the Popol Vuh. There is a disturbing parallel in the Genesis story of Babel. In that account, human society has recovered after a great cataclysm, the flood, and rebuilt itself to the point that a city has been developed in Mesopotamia, in the region of Sumeria. The city would include a tower with a stargate. Clearly alarmed by this last technological detail, the powerful ones confer in council as to what should be done to manage the advancing capabilities of the human race. Quote, "If they are capable of this," they say, "nothing will be impossible for them." End quote. Curiously, it was only after I read about the switching off of our higher faculties by the engineers in the Mayan story that the profound cruelty of the Babel event in Genesis really struck me. When we read biblical narratives as God stories, we are programmed to ignore or excuse quite monstrous actions, because they are understood to be the actions of a holy God. Yet, surely his ways are higher than ours, not lower. As soon as we reframe the stories as the actions of powerful ones, the morality of the actions can immediately be seen with shocking clarity. Suddenly, genocide is nothing other than genocide. An act of retribution is nothing other than an act of retribution. The current version of the Babel story in Genesis reports it as a story of Yahweh. However, the plural forms, the language of conferring, the action of coming down, and the quote, "let us go down and confuse," end quote, all clue us that this is in fact another Elohim story, as indeed it has to be, being placed in time centuries ahead of Yahweh's appearance to Moses. Our redactor friend Jay has done little more, it would seem, than insert the holy name into an Elohim story. According to our mainstream biblical translations, the divine punishment that is meted out upon the humans is God's retribution for the terrible crime of infringing divine zoning laws, constructing a building that is too tall, and his punishment is for the arrogance of trying to reach the heavens. Read that way, the Babel story would surely be a bizarre overreaction on the part of God. Not to mention that we have erected taller buildings in the ages since without any outpouring of divine wrath. Something is clearly off-key in that picture. In fact, even in our conventional translations, there is a clue apparent that all is not as it seems. What exactly does reaching the heavens involve? As I suggested earlier, a tighter translation of the word Babel indicates that the tower is intended to house a stargate that will literally enable people to reach the heavens. The nuance is confirmed when cross-referenced with the cuneiform telling of the story, in which 300 observers are dispatched from Babel to their stations among the stars. The text tells us that it is the technological ability being built into Babel that the Council of Powerful Ones wishes to sabotage. They do not want to see human beings operating on that level. They do not want to be jostling up against a spacefaring human race, and so they resolve in council to shut down the entire civilization. In the drama of Babel, we watch as a highly developed technological society is utterly destroyed and its city abandoned as the powerful ones intervene to stall human progress. In a callous and violent act, the powerful ones pull the plug on human civilization once again. This time, they do it by extracting from the human beings the faculty of spoken language, as if by inducing a collective stroke, the powerful ones turn our brains' default settings all the way down, right back to the beginning, to the point of extinguishing our human capacity for intelligible speech. In an instant, we find ourselves returned to an almost animal state. All around the world, we find the cities of past civilizations abandoned and forgotten. We are left to wonder what caused their civilization to falter. How were they not able to continue? Was it disease, flood, fire, famine, climate change, or nuclear fallout? In the case of Babel in Mesopotamia, Genesis supplies an answer. The population is incapacitated by an assault from a more advanced and non-benevolent species. It was an act of unspeakable violence, literally. In Babel, we are witnessing the neurological equivalent of bombing human civilization farther back than the Stone Age. In that moment, the continuity of the Bible's timeline is lost. What sharing of knowledge, what record-keeping, law, literature, or technology would be possible from that point on without shared knowledge? Indeed, the Bible's stories of beginnings stop right there. Nothing further happens until, in a completely different age, Abraham and Sarah emerge from out of Sumeria. They are children of the ancient culture credited with inventing, or rather, reinventing reading, writing, dating, record-keeping, agronomy, technology, law, and the city. Cuneiform script was created as a method of transcribing the diversity of languages now present in the world. All this from out of the ashes of that simple plain of Shinar, where human progress had been decimated in the world of long ago. Abraham and Sarah's journey, beginning in Samaria, plays out in the world as we know it, albeit the powerful ones are still present. The world before the time of our father and mother in faith requires us to unpick everything we thought we knew about planet Earth, human beings, and God. We have a lot of remembering to do. And if we ever needed an indication that the powerful ones, sky people, engineers of that world long ago, were not merely the literary projections of a God of love, we only need to put the incredible anti-human violence of Babel next to the violence of the flood and the violence of the fall, and we have more than enough of an indication. All were attacks aimed directly against the progress of human society. We need to rescue our understanding of the true God from being confused with the not nice stories of the powerful ones, just as Joshua calls us to forget the powerful ones whom your ancestors served in Sumeria and in the time before Abraham and Sarah. Serve Yahweh and know that He is God. If we confuse the truth of God with the stories of the powerful ones, we end up associating our God with their monstrous acts. The actions of the powerful ones, sky people, engineers, reveal them as beings of many layers, some benign, some less so. We see them treating human beings much as we would treat livestock on a farm, or in the way human masters might treat their slaves. Such comparisons don't leave a very pleasant taste in the mouth. Our mythologies do not make for sweet fables that we can tell our children to encourage them to be good and devout. The storylines themselves force us to listen to these mythologies differently and consider what fragments of understanding we are being offered by the elders and memory keepers of ancient times. We cannot read stories that share so many common motifs as if they were purely creative allegories, which just happen to parallel each other from culture to culture out of pure coincidence. On the other hand, a fundamentalist reading of our mythologies can only survive by ignoring all the anomalies. Simply reading these mythologies over the months of my forced seclusion was sufficient to break the spell of the fable versus fundamentalist dialect with which we so often approach our stories of beginnings. As I joined the dots from one mythology to the next, I could see that the very strangeness of the stories and the unlikely repetition of those strange motifs stand as evidence that in these mythologies lies a body of ancient collective memory. I might call it collective trauma, because it appears to be the most scarring aspects of our original journey into being that our mythologies recall. Memory has a way of doing that. If these stories are not the repositories of ancient memory, then you really have to ask what other purpose they could possibly serve. Why would human beings invent such demeaning stories about themselves? These explanations glorify no one. Such accounts of our engineering don't glorify the true God. Neither do they glorify the powerful ones, sky people, engineers, nor any human elites. Neither do they provide an inspirational or motivating explanation for the presence of the human race. Ultimately, there is really no good reason for anyone to invent this as their cultural mythology. Each indigenous people has taken great care in its culture of sacred storytelling. I believe that this lore holds for posterity, for generation after generation, for any with an ear to hear. It is the memory of us, who we are and where we have come from. If we can embrace this possibility, it sends us back to review the long and complex timeline of human development and ask, when did the engineers do their work? How can we know? And is there any tangible evidence of a higher intelligence episodically interacting with human history? This was the question I found myself mulling over, but not in my shipping crate. I was in a land far away, standing in front of a 12-foot-tall anomaly in the Indian capital of Delhi. That is the end of Chapter 7. Peace and blessings to you all.